In this episode, I talk with Peter Armstrong. He's one of the co-founders of Leanpub. I think they're a really interesting company. I've been using them on a project that I've been working on lately called Every Book is a Startup. And in this, roughly 50-minute conversation, I talk with Peter about the origins of Leanpub, some of the problems that his startup is working to address, and what situations might their startup be helpful for you if you're thinking about writing and publishing a book. Enjoy. Gosh, I'm trying to think. I think the best place to start is, when did you and I meet? Like 8 years ago, 7 years ago?
I think almost more than that. So Leanpub launched in 2010.
Okay.
I wrote the Lean Publishing Manifesto, right? Like we were both converging around the same ideas, right? Like my Lean Publishing Manifesto was like a book's a startup. Here's why, blah blah, blah. And you're like every book's a startup. And then we we met. I think we talked together at some conference in
It was like in Seattle.
Seattle.
It was like
Yeah,
it was like a day-long kind of lean conference,
yeah,
right?
yeah. Agile or Lean or something in Seattle. It was either Seattle or Portland, but I think it was Seattle.
I think it was.
Yeah, some one day unconferencey thing or 2 day. I don't remember. But yeah, wait, like almost a decade ago. Crazy.
Right?
So Leanpub's been around for the past 8 years. Um, so we met back then. Since then, Leanpub evolved from the
Well,
whole blog to the book. Go ahead.
right.
Yeah.
If let's do both versions of that. So the first one I would ask you is, if you're at the dinner party right now and someone says, "Oh, what's this Lean Pub thing?
Right.
What's the elevator pitch for Lean Pub nowadays?"
Sure. So Leanpub basically, so the really shortest thing is publish early, publish often, right? Taking the idea of publishing in progress, right? Launching, iterating, getting feedback from your readers, making a better book. When you have a finished book, you can sell a print or whatever. That's the sort of standard historical one. The newest one is that this idea of publishing in progress and iterating in public can be applied to books and to courses. And so really recently, Leanpub got into the courses space, like the MOOC space. And so we've created this workflow. So the new elevator pitch is, imagine you're on your computer writing in plain text. You click one button and you have a full, complete, really nice looking book or a full, complete MOOC, like online course, all created from one plain text manuscript. And we can do that today.
And I could attest to that. It's exactly what I'm doing with the new version. It's the platform I'm using for the new version of Every Book is a Startup, and it's fascinating. And I want to talk about that more. Let me ask a couple more questions to kind of create a baseline for people who are
Sure.
listening. The Take me back to when you started in 2010. What I was wondering, and I don't know if I knew the answer to, is what was the problem that you saw then? Like, what was the thing that
Right.
started you down this path? I know you had some publishing experience. There were some things you were trying to do, but what was the problem that you saw then that starts you on this?
Sure. My first book was really interesting in that I self-published it first before it became a traditionally published book. And so um, I was this nobody living in Maple Ridge in 2006 or seven, just over a decade ago. And I had this idea that wouldn't it be great for Adobe Flex or Macromedia Flex, Adobe Flex to connect with Ruby on Rails and be this thing. I thought this is great, it's crazy, but it's a great idea. So I started writing a book and self-publishing it. And this process that I evolved where I literally was self-publishing a PDF on Lulu and I hid it at a secret URL on the internet so people could get updates from going to flexiblerails.com/rumpelstiltskin slash security through obscurity.html.
Right.
This totally ghetto process that I created was better. So that was my first book, and then it became traditionally published, and that went really well and all that. And then I made a second book from scratch, the traditionally published way, and I realized, oh my goodness, it's worse. Like the process I created for my first book that I self-published, I had all this grassroots community. I had about 1,000 people around the world who'd bought my book, who were giving me feedback. I'd made a Google group. It was an alive thing. And the second book launched. Right as I was launching it, Adobe changed the namespace and every code example broke. But also, no one cared. So I had this complete failure where I did things like the right way and it was a flop. And I did things this wrong, improvised way, and it was great. And so Leanpub sort of represented the productization of everything I sort of had iterated on, over a couple of years, self-publishing my first technical book. And so the problems Leanpub were solving was just basically everything that I had to do myself the hard way. Could we just make it automated, essentially?
So what you're pointing at is really two pieces of it, and there might be more aspects than this, but what I hear you saying is that there's one side to this, which is there's a technical problem to solve, right? If we're going to try to make books more than once, which it seems like is the normal process, it's like, I'm going to make this thing. Maybe I'm going to do it in isolation. I'm going to hand it off maybe to an editor who's going to do some more work on it. They're going to hand it off to maybe a designer, maybe not. And so you get these different people. So there's this technical problem of if I want to make this book over and over again. But you're pushing almost just as hard on the business sense, the market sense for, in publishing in this way and exposing as I go along, that I'm essentially putting myself in a better position. Yeah. So maybe talk about each one of those individually.
And the neat thing is you talk about them individually, but they're really connected, right? Mm-hmm. So you have a technical problem of like the way that books are made is this artifact of the way print books are made. So even today, the tool chain is like writer goes off and makes a manuscript. They make it in Word or whatever, and they do all this formatting, and then they iterate with the development editor, sending chapters back and forth in Word, and then they're done, and then it goes off to the typesetters, and they take all your formatting you work really hard on, they throw it all away, and then because you didn't do it right, and you couldn't possibly have done it right because they're working in different tools, and then they take those tools and they make a really nice looking print book, and then that print book also happens to produce the thing that they take and sell as a PDF, and then somehow EPUB and Mobi get produced. Literally, some people have scanned physical books as the way to produce EPUBs and Mobis. And if you want to define what an afterthought is, I think that's like canonical definition. So this is this tool chain, which has been set up over the past 100 years to make physical books, and then since the dawn of computers to make we have this desktop publishing tool chain. And then there's the social idea of, okay, how would you like to publish? Well, what if you want to publish 10 times a day, or 10 times a week, or 10 times a month? Well, that tool chain that I just talked to you about is completely unworkable, right? If you have to make edits in anything other than plain text, you will just straight up lose. Like even Word, even if you could write in Word and click one button and get a book, that would basically be like the only thing that would be barely fine. Like, because Word doesn't sort of, I wouldn't want to write an entire book in Word. Word is kind of best like chapter by chapter type of thing. But the idea that, okay, so if you want to iterate and use and do this approach where you get a real connection with your readers and publish in progress and do all this lean startup-y, lean publishing approach, well, the tools you use have to be so lightweight that all you do is focus on your words, and to publish you click a button and everything else just happens. And then that can enable the human processes, like the social processes of getting out there, iterating in public, build, measure, learn, all this sort of lean startup-y type stuff that you do to get to build and launch a book. So they're very connected.
What about this piece of, as you're pointing out, the tool chain kind of has this segmentation to it. And I think to a certain extent it points to that there's very different activities going on in each one of those steps, right? The writer is involved in a very particular creative activity. The editor is involved in I think an equally creative but a pretty different kind of activity set when they're doing their work. And, design, and maybe even I tend to use UX more almost as a description for, maybe making this whole thing sound more like a lean process. But they're doing something, in the traditional sense that's 100% different than any one of those other two. And I guess I have this thought or theory that the nature of those being so different is what has caused the technology to be different, the tool chain to be different, the difficulty of getting those three activities to work together with each other. Do you buy that, and how have you gone about to try to sort of solve that as you've thought about Leanpub?
Right. So one funny thing is, despite how much people try to be disciplined about it, they always end up wanting to do the other activity. So when you're writing, we get questions like, questions around how do I, get this one page break just slightly different, or people wanting to micromanage things. And it's like, and for example, and so our take on it is, look, like widows and orphans, it's like our answer is we don't care. If it, like, we added, after much foot dragging, like a page break thing you can put in, but like that was pulled out of us kicking and screaming essentially. Like, our point is, when you're writing, formatting is procrastination. And so now, have you ever read this essay? If you go to like structuredprocrastination.com, have you ever seen, there's this really great article, it's like 50 or 60 years old, from some Stanford professor, I think, it's about structured procrastination as a tool for procrastinators to become like useful human beings, essentially. And basically, like, so, right, procrastinating is great. I use structured procrastination as like one of my superpowers. Like, I find ways to accomplish all kinds of things when I'm trying to avoid something. So for a writer, writing is hard, and you get stuck, and then you go off, and then you start thinking that this widow or orphan over here, or the font size over here, or how would this wrap, or blah, blah, blah. You start thinking that's important. But it's not. What you're just trying to do is avoid writing the next paragraph, right? That's important. All the other stuff should be deferred. And so Leanpub, our solution is basically like write in plain text using Markdown, like either the old Leanpub flavored Markdown style or the newer like Markua style, and give you like these global settings, right? Like, you want to change the font? Okay, pick the font for your book. Here's a list of 10, right? And do you not like the font? Suggest it to us and we'll add it. Like, you've done that, and we've added, I think we've either added it or we're about to. It's like, but these types of things should be global settings, not things you micromanage. But it's so hard. I mean, everyone thinks about these things as important. I mean, my son, he's a teenager. He's writing a novel. He's not using Leanpub. And he like asked me the other day, he's like, what font would be good for blah? I'm like, the irony here, we're having this conversation about, well, what font would be good for this? I'm like, you know what? Whatever font makes you write the best would be the right font.
Exactly.
For you.
Exactly. And it's so interesting. It's so like for you to just have said, and you gave a example, there's probably a bunch of other examples. When you say, oh, widows and orphans don't matter, right. My question to you would be, do they not? I think you're saying they don't matter in the writing process.
For the author, they don't matter.
Right.
When you're done a book, if someone's going to make a print book out of it, then they'll take that print book and they'll do the things and they'll be done and it'll look like it should.
Yeah.
When you're writing, that's not you, right? So to you as the author, you need to compartmentalize and be like, that doesn't matter at all, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's like, we think about, I mean, in generally, like, people have internalized, people think like you can't write without, say, Word or without whatever. It's like, okay, look at human history, right? And just look at the part where we wrote stuff down as books. Okay, now, of that length of time, how much is our current tool chain? Right? Okay, like this much. How much of all the important books that have been written, right? Okay, well, that gets bigger because more people write more things. But the point is, most of the useful stuff was written pre-computer, and all of it. It doesn't matter. The tool, like, the important thing is what are the words? Like all the point is like in terms of the formatting, the only formatting that matters to an author is the formatting that could not be changed by a publisher without changing the work. Mm-hmm. And so, for example, like if you're E.E. Cummings, spaces matter, right? Like if you want to go in monospace land and make a poem that's all over the place and it's got exactly this, then the spacing matters. If you're writing like a sonnet, no, it doesn't matter, right? Mm-hmm. Like, so if you're writing a book, like again, like like all those types of things. Yeah, sorry, that was a huge tangent, but
no, because I think that the reason I'm sort of teasing that out a bit is because I think that when people think about your platform or right. How can it be used and not be used, they want to point to they want to call out the point cases where it doesn't work. Like, I can only get this far, and because it fails here, well then,
right, and that's great. And so now the interesting thing is, this is one of those things where like, it's always tempting to try to be helpful, and like, so we have this workflow which is fully automated, right? Like write in plain text, click one button, get an ebook, get a print-ready PDF. All you do is slap a cover on it. Okay, now, so since that's true, you want to provide enough options that what you're doing is acceptable. So for example, like everything I've said so far, when you think, okay, well, what does Leanpub do with images? So like as an example, what should Leanpub do with images? Mm-hmm. So the hardline purist thing to be would be is like, you can't format them. You can say what their name is, like either URL or like you can put it in a file system. You can do no formatting whatsoever. Now, if that was what we did, then the ebook that we produced would be not acceptable in almost every case involving images. So we have the bare minimum, like, of formatting as supported as attributes, so that you can get like an image that's over here and text will flow around it, or you can center it, or you can whatever. And so, but the point is, you can say even percentage width, right? But like literally the amount of attributes you get to specify are like 2 or 3 or 4, like almost nothing, right? Yep. So, now, so you can get something that is a perfectly, like the interesting thing is layout in Mobi, or like book design in general in Mobi is essentially so limited that we produce Mobi files, like for Kindle, right, that look just as good as what any publisher produces, right, if not better, because our toolchain is optimized toward like producing ebooks, and so we don't. It's not like we're going and producing a Mobi file starting with all this really rich visual layout. No, we're starting with these really simple attributes. It's a 30% wide image. It's going to be blah blah blah, right? Mm-hmm. Now, it'll go so far, and then we stop. And so people ask, oh, can I just do this or just do that? It's like, no, we do these basic set of things that produce an ebook that's totally fine, and that your readers won't care if it's any better, right? Like, they won't. It's really sad because you, the author, really do care, but actually your readers already have moved on to the next page. They don't care anymore about this page, right?
Yes.
And so now if you, the author, want to obsess, the greatest thing ever is we're not like, oh, yeah, no, you can't. We're really opinionated. No. Like, again, we're also a business, and so we want to make our customers happy, and our most important customers are our authors, and they do care, some of them. And so the correct answer is, well, when should you care? Mm-hmm. And the answer is, well, when you're writing, you should care to the level of, you want the ebook to look good enough that you have readers and you can iterate in public and blah, blah, blah. But when you're done, that's when you should care. Okay, so done. Well, then what? Well, turns out there's lots of great tools to make really good looking books, right? InDesign, for example, is like the best one, or the most popular one. Mm-hmm. So we have a one-click button, get InDesign files. And then you click the button, we produce InDesign files. You can take those files and go off to a designer and be like, hi, I've got this, I'm making a book, I want you to make a book. Like, I want you to design my book. And they're probably going, oh no, this person's got a whole bunch of Word files, and they've probably done all this formatting, it's gonna be really bad. And then the Leanpub author will be like, here's the InDesign, please make it look nice. And they'll be like, oh, okay. Right? So InDesign is our escape valve. InDesign is like, okay, you produce the book. We're all about selling in-progress books. You can sell completed books. We have lots of authors who take their print-ready PDF, which again, it's a button, click it, get a print-ready PDF, mm-hmm. right? Which is just the same as the ebook, except we do things like, margins on the inside are bigger than margins on the outside, because in physical books have insides and outsides. ebooks don't. So we do all that type of stuff when we make a print-ready PDF for you, but it's all automated. You can't say like, oh, okay, I want my inside margin slightly bigger. We just have these basic level stuff that we make the decisions, and if you don't like it, well, there's InDesign, and that lets us focus on, like, keep the focus on, look, you should be using Leanpub as this platform to write and create, not as this platform to be like InDesign minus 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 minus. Look, we're never going to be InDesign, right?
Right.
And InDesign is a complement to Leanpub, right? And hopefully, there's lots of complements, but even if not, at least there's some standard that everyone uses, and this make print books, really, really nicely overly designed ebooks out of it.
Do you think this sort of, what was your shorthand version of it? This idea of print often, iterate publicly, right?
So this is my, like, obviously it's straight, the open source, like, release early, release often, Eric Raymond,
Yeah.
I mean, right? So release early, release often becomes publish early, publish often. And the neat thing there, when you think about it, is like, that's taking a software thing and applying it to books. But really, so much of what Leanpub does and what you've done, and like some people do, is you take a software lifecycle approach, alphas, betas, early customers, iterating, and just doing all that stuff in publishing land. And so the idea of taking a slogan that was from software world and pulling it over to publishing is very deliberate, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And the question I have is, do you think it works for every kind of book? Do you think that, or that would be the first question. And the second question would be, and then what's the experience on the Leanpub platform? What sort of authors do you find are attracted to using the kinds of functionality and tools that we've been talking about?
Right. Okay, so I think it works for a lot more books than you'd think. So, for example, one group book that people would wonder, oh, well, what about fiction? Because lots of people who have some amount of knowledge think, oh, well, the author goes off in their ivory tower or their cabin in the woods, and they work in complete isolation for months, and then they produce this work of genius, and then the world gets it a year later. So what about fiction? And the answer there is actually, surprisingly, lots of things that you didn't think were published in serial were, like Dickens, Dostoevsky, Tolstoy,
Absolutely.
And as well as like some of the great literature, also like some of the really the origin of all the stuff you see in airports now was all basically, it's our modern version of stuff by Mary Elizabeth Braddon and Wilkie Collins. And the sensation fiction of Victorian England was published in serial. Sherlock Holmes, right? The sensation fiction, that was like it was basically, it literally produced like the equivalent of Netflix in Victorian England, like lending libraries, so you could get your latest copy of the latest fiction. Get your latest chapter of The Woman in White, right? And you can read, these things are still readable now. Like, they're entertaining. Like The Woman in White, The Moonstone, Lady Audley's Secret. Like, you can see that these things were published in serial because they read like soap operas, right? Like, they're.
I think that's why Dickens. That's why you like Dickens, is that he pushes you through the story, but you didn't. Unless you know that was serialized. Mm. You would know
but then
otherwise.
Once you realize something was serialized, then you realize, oh, this book is really, really, really long. Say in Tolstoy's case, well, it's like, I've got this book and people are reading it. Let's keep going, right? So like you can, like, you realize, like with Dickens, for example, crowds would be gathering like in New York, being like, "Is little Nell dead?" Like trying to find out what's the news from England, right? Like it'd be like the equivalent of like the situation now with Game of Thrones, right, where there's one more season and people don't know what's going to happen, right? As opposed to, when a situation where people who read the books basically knew what would happen, and one of the things to think about is some of the most popular works now were published in serial. So, I mean, the example I like to use a number of years ago was 50 Shades was published as in serial, but as fan fiction of Twilight, right?
Yes.
So if you think about it, but then in more generally, in larger form, things like Harry Potter weren't published in serial in terms of the book, but the series of books was, installments, just bigger chunks. But it has more of an effect if the thing is being built over this time in public than if things just lands in the world in one piece. Mm-hmm. And so, but back to Leanpub in terms of what is the approach good for and not good for. So I think it's actually good for a lot of fiction. I think that the publishing in progress aspect on Leanpub for fiction has not been demonstrated as well as, say, publishing computer books in progress. But the nice thing is I can point at competitors, things like Wattpad, right, or complements. Like Wattpad, for example, like wants to be like the YouTube of writing, and they have tons of fiction, and it's all serial. This is all serial publishing. And then you look at Asia, and that type of serial publishing is being more dominant there. It's partially because you can fit more characters on a phone than words, and so the idea of reading in serial fiction on mobile is more feasible when phones, even when phones were bad. Now phones are good, and you can read, can read anything on your phone. Um, so one thing that might be bad for is like academic stuff, where, for example, um, if you're doing something where you must keep it completely secret until it's fully baked, then publishing in
Right.
progress, then publishing in progress isn't a thing. Um, Now, lightweight tools are a thing, so the Leanpub platform would still work. You just click preview over and over and over, and you can even keep it in stealth mode if you're like, oh, I don't want people to know that I'm even thinking about this area. Um, but lightweight tools basically are good for everyone in terms of writing. Like, now, interestingly, one thing that's not good for some people is, so for example, in Leanpub you can write in Markdown, like either one of two variants. But already people's eyes be glazing over. Some of them, if they're hearing me say, "Oh yeah, you write in plain text," and people go, "What's that?" In Markdown, oh my goodness, it sounds hard. Um, so let's say you're non-technical, like, and you want to write a novel. It sounds like so far when I was talking about like Markdown and plain text and blah blah blah, it sounds like Leanpub. That might not be for you. And then you think, oh, well, you can sync with Leanpub using Dropbox. I've heard of that. Or GitHub. What the heck? Oh no! Right? So or Bitbucket. Ah! Right? Again, our core, the people who love us, they're like the computer programming authors. But Leanpub is also usable and really nice and friendly for completely non-technical, like novel writers say. Like we have a visual editor, so let me tell you the features of our visual editor. Chapters, sections, subsections, italic.
That's it. Yeah, I try. Yes.
No bold,
Nope.
no images, um, nothing, right? Like, oh yeah, you can make paragraphs, obviously you can hit the enter key. But like the point is, okay, so well, what the heck? Why would Leanpub do this? They've lost their minds. It's like, well, okay, think about it. What's in a novel? Chapters, sections, subsections, italics, right? There's
Yes.
no bold text. There's no underlining. There's no links. There's no images. There's no, So basically, it's like this is a visual typewriter. Now, of course, the amount of markdown you'd need to learn to do that, most people could learn in 2 minutes. But that's still a barrier. So it's like if you want a visual, and also even if you've learned it, it's a bit distracting seeing asterisks and pound signs. I mean, if you have an editor like iWriter or I mean, I write in Emacs, but like, it's still, if you don't want to see anything but your words, then our visual typewriter is nice because you don't you see just the words. And so in terms of people that Leanpub would not be for, I think writing in plain text and Markdown, if you're totally scared of the computer, don't do that. Use our visual editor instead. If you're writing something that is like totally secret, then don't click the publish button.
What? So I think what's interesting is you have this publishing platform, and then you have you have an e-commerce platform connected to it. Like we haven't talked. We've talked really about the writer side of it, but I think the reader side is almost equally as interesting in that as I produce new updates and I publish them, the platform actually notifies readers that there are new updates for them to check out. So there's probably other stuff we could dig into there. But the question I had is, we've talked a lot about how authors have been affected or potentially be affected by a platform like this. Do you have any sort of insights of what you've seen on how readers sort of end up interacting with these books differently than they would sort of other projects?
Huh. Um, it's funny. So I have fewer really good insights than I should, our focus in terms of readers, our focus is so much on authors. We've really underserved like the platform. So for example, so let me tell you some things about the readers. So some people, it's like really shocking how many Leanpub books they have. Like we thought, oh, like initially when we first launched, we didn't even have a shopping cart, right? Because, well, it'd be presumptuous to build a shopping cart if there's only one book that interests
Right.
someone. So we went for a meaningful amount of time with no shopping cart even. But yeah, no, we have readers who have, dozens of Leanpub books, like a number, and some readers like just Leanpub is where they go for their books. We have so one thing we've been surprised by we made a number of bets about what we thought would happen if we created a platform and a community that had some values in it. So the values and the outcomes are related and they're interesting. So we have a 45-day return policy. And we have no DRM. So anyone who downloads one of our books can just copy it, share it with their friends, their coworkers, whatever, put it on servers, right? All kinds of things that a publisher would just like lose their minds. So we have no DRM. We have this 45-day return policy. We have variable pricing. So we have like authors set two prices, like a suggested price and a minimum price. And the minimum price can either be free or it can be $4.99 an app. So a reader can if you're an author, you can say, yeah, my book's available for free, but please pay $10. This is what I think it's worth. But if you don't have the money, if you live in a non-wealthy country, $10 might be a meaningful amount of money to you, right? So make it available for free. So we have these sets of values in the platform, right? About respect, because Leanpub is really a community of places where we have this huge respect for authors who pay really high royalties, right? 80% royalties. And we show that in our sliders. Like when you drag the slider about what you're paying, you see what the author gets right underneath it. And it's this transparency. And then we have this 45-day refund period. So if you're an author, you publish a book, it's in progress. The reader doesn't know, are they going to get a good book or a bad book, or is the book going to be abandoned, or blah, 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 blah. So there's risk, right? But there's no risk because you buy the book and you don't like it, click a button and get a refund. And so the things we've learned are, okay, well, one, we don't have any kind of huge problem with piracy. Like, there is some, but like that's the internet. And there's no such thing as security in that regard anyway. People don't abuse our refund policy. Like it's, because mathematically, if you're like, well, why would anyone pay for anything? They just buy it and wait 44 days to get a refund, repeat, right? Come up with fake email addresses. No, people are fundamentally inherently good, right? Like if you set up a platform that lets people behave appropriately, then most of them will. Especially like when you realize as a reader, oh, hey, I paid $20. The author got 16. Wow, okay. Why would I click if I enjoyed this person's book, why would I click the get refund button? That would be really, really rude, right? Like I'd literally be taking money away from the author, right? So in terms of, so we have good behavior. So one thing that we have, for example, we set up we put some discuss forums on the book pages. We didn't really push it very hard, and we didn't really work. So one of the things we've talked about for years, but haven't really kind of phoned in a bit, is the community aspect around it, because we think it's important. I mean, I thought it was important in 2007, pre-Leanpub even. But, I mean, the tool chain to make a really good community around a book or a course, if we wanted to go do that from scratch ourselves, that would be a lot of work. So, we have limited time. We're a startup, so we just dropped in Discuss forums years ago and just used those for they're still there. We recently switched to Discourse for new books. And so one of the things that we're going to be doing is, taking all the Discuss forums down, swapping them out and replacing them with Discourse forums. And we'll be putting more work there, because what we found from readers is the readers will just contact authors directly on Twitter, or they'll email them, or authors and readers will figure out a way to communicate as much or as little as they want to. And so, so the general thing is, in terms of lessons from reader behavior on Leanpub, is you don't have, if you're thinking about this from a perspective of an entrepreneur, is you don't have to be all draconian and bad. If you just create a thing that's respectful and appropriate, and transparent, people will just largely be fine.
What have you found with how readers tend to react to that pricing structure that you have, which is super interesting? This idea that you create a little bit of structure that the author can sort of, like you said, they can pick sort of 2 points. But then there's a slider, like the reader can actually decide how much they want to pay for the book. So if I'm an author who's thinking about, I guess there's like kind of 2 questions, almost. There's 2 ways I'm thinking about it, but it's in the form of one question. I'm wondering, as an author or as a publisher, what sort of experience do you have with readers in terms of how they interact with having that choice? And is the dollar amount that I set as the price, I'm going to guess that's relatively important to the kind of behavior then that the reader exhibits around what they might do.
Yeah. So there's a number of interesting things there. So first off, like, the notion of having a free price or some higher price is a really interesting one, because when you think about it, if I say, hey, Todd, I bought a 99-cent book on my Kindle. Okay. Right now, you probably have some preconceptions about it, right? You probably don't think it's like some great work of art. You probably think I'm just reading some cheap piece of fiction.
Or you got a really good deal. It was on sale that day.
Right.
Yes.
Huge sale that day, right? Now, so for Leanpub, we have for a long time had a 99-cent minimum price, and then we went all the way up to $4.99. And the reason, and we were considering when we were making the decision, oh, should it be $2.99? We're like, no, we don't believe in that as a price. We believe in free, and we believe in $4.99 and higher. I mean, the average sale price on Leanpub is more than $10. Like, if you think about the average set price of a paid sale on Leanpub, it's meaningfully more than $10. And so that's a really surprising thing. If you think about a world where Amazon says between $2.99 and $9.99, we pay authors 70% minus some stuff. But below that or above that, we pay them 35%.
Yep.
Which is, if you ever want to have an idea of market power, the notion that Amazon can say, oh yeah, if you're a publisher and you sell a book for $12, you make less than if you'd sold that book for $9.99.
Yes.
Holy cow. Right?
And it's amazing when you start having those kind of conversations with authors, and that you get into that next level of detail of like, okay, well, here's all the players and how they actually play in that market. And authors just, they're amazed that Amazon would make those sorts of decisions. Obviously, I think Amazon makes those decisions because they know the lower the price, the more they're going to sell.
Yeah.
So there's right?
Yeah, there's a number of things that play there. But yeah, so in terms of what we've so for us, it's like, so behavior. So one thing is, you can have a book that's free and that costs money. That's just really surprising to people. Those books can make a lot of money, right? We've seen, and then sometimes some readers make decisions that you'd wonder, well, why would a reader pay this amount? It's a weird amount. It's a weird number. Oh, but it turns out that if you pay that amount, the author gets exactly $10. Oh, why would they care? Well, because they saw, and we actually let them drag the author earns slider as well. See, there's 2 sliders. There's a what you pay slider, and there's what an author earns slider. And I remember fighting for this years ago. I'm like, yeah, I want 2 sliders, and I want you to grab both of them, right? So if you want the author to make more money, grab that slider and pull it, right? Or type in. And so the idea that people do care about supporting authors, right? And the best way to see that is you see people paying voluntarily more than the minimum price, and even sometimes more than the suggested price. And it's not just a question of free or pay some suggested price. Like, there's like setups where like, minimum is 19, suggested is 29, like meaningfully different. And even the minimum price is a good price to pay, and people will still pay more than it. Like, I can't tell you a book where I've only seen the minimum price paid. Like, it's just amazing. So yeah, people will pay more than minimum price. Right, and it's great. It's like the author says, hey, here's what I think this book is worth. Please pay that. That's the way it's framed. Like, it's a suggested price. It's like when you go to, the example I like, let's say you go to some sandcastle fair. So I live on Vancouver Island, in Victoria, but up partway up the island, there's this place called Parksville, and every year they have sandcastles. And you can be on the beach if you're a really cheap person. If you're on the beach and look, you can see all the sandcastles. But what do? You walk up to the door and you drop your money in the suggested donation bin, and then you walk in and look at the sandcastles closer. What do you pay? You pay the suggested price, right? Which is about, I don't know, $5 or $10.
Right.
We live in a wealthy part of the world. That money does not materially affect most people, right? Then that's the suggested price or suggested donation, and you pay it, and that's part of the experience. And so, like with Leanpub, it's like, okay, you have a minimum price, which is like, I'm not selling the book for less than this, and that could be like $4.99 or it could be $0. It can't be $2.99. If you're going to charge money, you have to at least price it $4.99, right? Mm-hmm. So $4.99 or higher. And so like they split between the minimum and suggested, like 10 to 20, 20 to 30, 4 to 20, like $4.99 to $20. Like you can have meaningful gaps, and lots of people will pay more than the minimum price, and people are constantly surprised by this. Like authors who spend all this time thinking, oh, Leanpub pays this, but if I went on like eJunkie or whatever, the royalty rate is different. You get more money. It's like, well, yeah, but you do all the customer support yourself, you handle the refunds yourself, chargebacks and whatnot, and then like, our variable pricing feature means that if Leanpub cost you nothing at all, it took no money. Like Leanpub, some people make more money from just the delta between the minimum and suggested price than Leanpub's portion. Like we make people, this one feature makes authors so much money. It's like this open secret that like people, but it's just surprising. People don't believe it. The idea that, oh, just in this voluntary extra paying, right?
Does the price that someone chooses, and it could really probably in your case be either one, whether it's the minimum or whether it's the suggested price, right? Does that tend to be anchors though for readers? Do you tend to find that the price moves around? I guess I'm trying to tease out is how important is that decision of the price that I set as an author on the Leanpub platform to the behavior of what my readers are going to do?
So the most important decision is, do you have a free price or not, mm-hmm. as the minimum? Mm-hmm. Because some of our books have the most sales, the most number of readers have a free version. Mm-hmm. Now, so that if you like, that's just like if you want like 100,000 readers, having a free price certainly helps you, mm-hmm. right? We found like the books that have the best, like, in terms of like, basically like the books that the authors, it's like, imposter syndrome, right? I mean, this isn't just for software developers. Holy cow, right? We see books where people price they do this great thing and they price it so low, and it's like, so part of our decision of pushing to $4.99 is, look, almost no one makes any money at all here, right?
Yeah. It's encouraging everybody to create a better ecosystem for both them and you. Yes.
I don't want Leanpub, or on a 99-cent sale, Leanpub and PayPal made about as much money as the author, right?
Right.
So but on a $5 sale, Leanpub makes, the author makes $4 on a $5 sale. Mm-hmm. Now take a print book. Well, how much would you have to sell a print book for the author to make $4? I mean, you know the answer, but most people wouldn't. Most people would be like, I don't know, $10. Right? No, right? You take a print book sale, divide it in two, and then take 10% and give that to the author. So if you had a $20 print book, the author gets $2. So a $40 print book maybe produces $4. Yep. So so in terms of like the economics, as an author, you're just as good. You're just as well off selling $5 ebooks as $40 print books. But the interesting thing is, that's not what. Again, it's really surprising for people who think of things in terms of $5, $10, but the average price of a Leanpub book is more than $10. Mm-hmm. You can price your in-progress book on some random JavaScript framework or whatever at $20, and people will happily pay it if you're sincere and transparent. People will pay it. They won't get refunds, right? You can if you're feeling really shy, set a minimum price for free.
Yeah, I think the message you're sharing is that authors are a little too timid, maybe sometimes in terms of how they handle their pricing, and that, and I
That's why
think,
I got rid of the 2.99 or 99 cent prices. That's just stupid. Like,
yeah, and
charge money.
the part that's interesting to me is um, if I set a $10 price as let's say it's the suggested price versus a $20 price. I guess the part that I'm wondering is there's probably some distribution around that price. There's probably some people might pay a little bit less, some people might pay a little bit more, but there's got to be some sort of I'm guessing that price that the decision the authors made, and I think, and this goes out in the case you just made, which is authors were making bad decisions not only for themselves but for Leanpub and probably for their customers by going to that $5 price. My question is, as you know, as the next version of Every Book
For
is a
you,
Startup is going to be
your
here.
how should you price your book? So
Yeah.
so if I was you, my gut would be to do one of a few things. Either say free minimum suggested is $9.99 or $14.99. Yeah. That would maximize like number of readers, right? And it would also, you get some meaningful number of sales that were non-free. Or you could say minimum $9.99, suggested $19.99 or $14.99. Like in terms of like the number, in terms of for like essentially a business book, like you know what I mean, like a not programming book. Like
right.
I think that like the combination of like 9 and 19 or 9 and 15, those types of things work. Free and 9, like free and 10, free and 20, those types of things work. Like one of our best-selling books by revenue and by number of copies is a book called Our Programming for Data Science. It has a free minimum price, right? $20 suggested price. Like, you know, so like it's when I read books, like, you know, if I read a business book in the airport and I've gotten 2 or 3 good ideas out of it, money well spent.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yep.
Worth $20, worth $10. What difference does it make? So like it's so you'd be better off. So if we didn't, like, what you wouldn't want to do is have a book like that where the minimum price was 99 cents and the suggested price was $3.99. That like would be actively worse than like minimums free, suggested 20, right? So it was like silly stuff like that like occasionally happened where you'd have some really great book that's a few hundred pages long and it had a minimum price of like $2, and it's like, you know, this book would sell just as well if it was priced way more. And if you wanted to get more readers, have a free version, right? Like have like, and then people, if you really want to do things, you can segment. So one thing I haven't talked about at all is a feature that we have, like extras and packages. And so say, for example, you wanted to, and let's just use your book. So first of all, we could pretend your book was a coding book and then say it's not. So say, okay, if your book was a programming book, you could have like the normal one, minimum price of free, suggested $20. Then you could have like the book plus code samples plus downloaded whatever, like data files and whatever. Minimum is 20, suggested is 25. And then you could have like another one which included that plus like some videos. Minimum is 30, suggested is 40. And so then you have 3 packages at different price points, right? And so for you, you could say, okay, my normal book, minimum 0, suggested 10, 15, 20. And then you could have like my book, like a 5-copy license. So you can just feel free to share this with your colleagues. And PDF worksheets, say if like you want to do a brainstorm about like say like, you know, yeah, if there was anything that was like material. Like if you had a business, like if you were writing a book, say about lean startup, you could just print a build, measure, learn diagram in a PDF 20 times. Right? You know, right? Like,
Yes.
I mean, I'm trying to say, like the book plus supplementary crap, right? And then that price of that thing would just be the suggested price, the minimum price of that thing.
Yeah.
Could be like the suggested price of the base package, plus some multiplier, like 50% or 10%, whatever. Like, and then you have a couple things, and then people. Like, and I mean, it's no mystery. Like when you look at pricing on the internet, there's like good, better, best. Like it's what, right? And
absolutely,
so that type of approach works really well too.
Last question. Tell me, as you're thinking about Leanpub as a platform, And you talked about a bunch of different things. You talked about books. You talked about the packages piece, which I'll be honest, I didn't know about. So you just said that, which is super
Right. So
interesting.
we
So
don't. We need to do a better job there because we
that
should.
one you
That's
do,
our fault, right? We
right?
absolutely need to do a better job there.
And then I knew about the coursework because I'd seen you. We talked about it a little bit, and I had seen you guys pushing a little bit more on the site.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me where Leanpub goes next. Like, what are the things that you think the platform needs as a product to do the next set of things that you think customers need?
Okay, so a few things. Um, we need. So we have a mobile app that is actually reasonably good for iPhone and Android, but it doesn't handle courses at all. So we need basically our mobile app to be a lot better and to handle like if we're gonna be a course publishing platform, the mobile app should be a great place to not only read the course material but also do the quizzes and exercises on mobile. Secondly, we need to have a native app on computers. So when you turn your computer on, there are your Leanpub books, right? Here are the updates. Oh, here's some new stuff that's on sale that are related to your Leanpub books. Um, it's just obvious. We should have had one years ago. It'll probably still, from the distance from when this is recorded to when we actually have one, it's still going to be way longer than it should be.
Yeah.
But we want to do it right. But we need a native app on computers. We need a way better app on mobile. We need to just in terms of those are sort of new directions that like people couldn't just assume we're doing. So yeah, those things. Also, we need to finish Markua support for courses and also in general because right now we're in this weird thing where like Leanpub flavored Markdown, which is like Markdown plus our little minor extensions, has been the way you make books for 8 years, and Markua is this new way which has the course support and is like cleaned up. But it's not done yet. The spec is done, but we haven't fully implemented the spec. So right now we're in this weird transition where we have like Leanpub flavored Markdown and we have Markua, and we'll always support Leanpub flavored Markdown, but like our Markua support needs to be done so that everyone just gets pointed at that, and then that's the thing that people see, and there's just less confusion about which one should I use. And right now the answer is Markua, as long if you don't mind when you look at a spec, and it turns out some of those things don't work. Or Leanpub flavored Markdown if you just want the documentation to be like 100% accurate and correct. And that's a really bad answer. So finish Markua, mobile app, native app. Courses we're just getting started. Like, I mean, the vision of write a book in plain text, click a button, you have a book, and people don't believe you, and then you build it and it works, and people are like, wow, it is actually as easy as that. That's like now a thing. Like, I mean, I can say like Leanpub is the best way in the world to write and publish an in-progress book and mean it and challenge anyone to say otherwise, right? Like, and regardless of even if you're going to sell on Leanpub or not, like we literally have the best workflow in the world to make a book, right?
I agree.
It's really amazing given how few resources we have, and you compare us to everyone else in the world who could have made the best way in the world to make a book. We did it. And so, okay, so one, getting more people to know that, right? And then do the same thing for courses. Like the workflow to create a MOOC is the caveman level stuff compared to what it should be, right? Making a MOOC should be as easy as making a Leanpub book. And so I think Leanpub needs to be we need to be the people who make that true. Someone will. Well, I like to think that someone would, but things don't just happen, right? You have to actually go out and make them happen. So like, yeah, we want to make our course platform as easy and simple for course creators as book creators. And then the really neat thing is we need to get authors who've made books to realize, oh, I actually have a course in here. Like 80% of the material I used for my book could just be straight up repurposed into a course. All I have to do is add some quizzes and exercises, maybe a few videos, and ta-da, I have a course. And then when you think about value that readers perceive, but also price points and stuff. Like, what will people pay for a tweet? Nothing. What will they pay for a blog post? Maybe they didn't have ad block on. What will they pay for a book? Well, 10, 20, 30 bucks. Mm-hmm. What will they pay for a course? Holy cow, really? That much, right? So we need to get Leanpub authors making courses out of their books too, because we think there's that's like the next level of getting money out of your work. is making courses.
Cool. Awesome. That's great. Thank you so much.